I love to cook at home, and having good kitchenware makes all the difference in the world. Not only does good equipment make prep and cooking easier, but it makes it more enjoyable. This is why both Joel and I are huge fans of Made in Cookware. Their wide range of cookware, from pots and pans to knives and flatware and even glassware, are designed to be professional quality for right in your home. Joel is a big fan of their knife sets, and I just upgraded all of our stock pots and saucepans to Made in stainless steel ones. This goes along with my many other stainless steel, carbon steel pans that I have. I have over a dozen pieces, and I absolutely swear by Made In's products. Next, I'm getting a set of beer glasses. Yes, beer glasses for the whole podcast crew. Take your home cooking to the next level by upgrading your cookware by going to unitedwedrink.com/madein. That's MADEIN. Find out why pros like Grant Achatz, Sean Brock, Nancy Silverton, and Eric Repair trust Made In. Go to unitedwedrink.com/madein. That's MADEIN, and upgrade your kitchen and cooking today. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour, more like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast with more hours spent in the weeds than any other beer podcast probably in the world. Welcome to United We Drink right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and what's sleep? I don't know what that is anymore. Today, I'm only joined by one half of our typical co-host. Joel is on special super secret assignment in Sedona, Arizona, while I'm joined here by a man who will probably say that it's an honor and a privilege to be on this show, which is a bullface lie, Kevin Abbott.
Well, Mike, it is actually an honor and a privilege to be introduced first and not have to hear you and Joel talk back and forth for 10, 15, 20 minutes while I sit here pretending that I'm not here yet. So I feel really good about this. I feel I'm overjoyed, really. I feel like I'm moving up in the world just by Joel not being here.
It would be great if there was an episode where one of us just pretended not to be here, but we were here the entire time.
Well, there's an old saying about how, I used to think you were a dumb shit, but there's so many other dumb shits have come along. You've moved up just by, proxy. And this is how I feel. Like I've moved up in the pecking order just by Joel not being here anymore. I haven't done anything better. I've just moved up.
That's a saying?
Yeah.
From you?
No, it's a colloquialism.
Oh, okay. Never heard that before.
Listen, I come up with a lot of things, man. What was the phrase that you were convinced was not true? Boy howdy.
I was not convinced that was a thing years ago, and then like your wife and my wife both were like very adamant about having used it, and I never had heard my wife say it. And then from watching Letterkenny, they use boy howdy a lot in there. And I'm like, okay, this is a thing that is bigger than I understood. Kevin, since it's just you and I, that means 100% of this podcast is drinking, I'm assuming.
That is true.
What are you having tonight?
I have got a can of our New Island Journey Pilsner, as well as our Cosmic Lighthouse Double IPA, and a little bit of whiskey. I've got even though Joel hasn't been drinking, I still have it in my mind that I have to drink for two.
So you don't have any water at all?
I do have a lemon version of the Aldi sparkling water as well as a plain sparkling water, and I brought that out specifically because Joel can't make fun of me about it.
Kevin, for the folks at home, can you hold up this Aldi sparkling water can for me so I can see if they are trying to rip anyone off? Doesn't look like anything I'm familiar with, because I know for their beer brands, they are known for ripping people off all over the place.
So they're just like every craft brewery in the world?
Exactly. Exactly. I have a can of our Cold Now. It's a cold IPA, which is a really hopped up lager that we brewed in collaboration with our friends at Invasive Species, brewed it over at our facility. It is very high. We actually brewed it with, fermented it with 2 different yeast strains. We used our Kolsch yeast and our house lager yeast and fermented it cold, then dry hopped it with Mosaic Cryo, Citra Cryo, and Strata. For all intents and purposes, despite this is a lager, it tastes like a hazy IPA, a very good hazy IPA at that. I'm very pleased with how this turned out. Oh, it's also now crystal clear, which I love. I have a Liquid Death Severed Lime, the lime version of them. And then I have as a backup Sierra Nevada Summerfest, of fucking lovely lager.
Great beer.
Yes. My wife picked up their variety pack from Costco a couple weeks ago that was pale ale, classic, love it. Torpedo, very good. Summerfest, it's one I look for every summer. And why can't I remember it now? It's like a citrus wheat ale. It's in that hazy little or the little line of them. I think it's citrus little something or another, and I'm sounding like such a fucking smart person by doing this. But I think it's fucking delicious as well.
Well, with Summerfest, you mentioning that, I think I have my old favorite Friday for next week, because that would be a really great entry in that series.
Yeah. How many times have you done Sierra Nevada in your old favorite Fridays now?
That's one of the problems I run into, is that I have breweries like Bell's, like Sierra Nevada, that I end up having so many beers that fit so well with that theme that I don't want to be using these breweries over and over and over again, especially in short proximity. So I try to space those out when I can. So I think I've done Torpedo, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I don't think I did Celebration around Christmas time. So I think maybe only 2 beers
Dibs.
from Sierra Nevada. What's that?
Dibs. I'm calling dibs on Celebration for
there we go.
For next winter.
Great. So that works for me. But I think only 2, maybe 3 beers from Sierra Nevada. I've done at least 2 or 3 from Dogfish Head, and a few from, not Sierra Nevada, from New Belgium. I don't think I've done more than 2 or 3 beers from any one brewery.
I think that on the last episode, when you invited me to do one, that I brought up Sammy Smith. So I will forego that if it means that I have to wait until wintertime to do Celebration, because that would be a fun one to do with you.
We can do both. That's the thing. We don't have to. I have to do one of these every single week. I don't know if you know this,
my arm, you're twisting me. Oh.
But that's 52 weeks a year, Mike. I don't know if you know the math on that, but that's a lot of beers we have to do. So you can be on both.
Weeks, days, months, years, I'll be there for you, Kev. But speaking of some of these older legacy brands that you bring up, have you done any by Stone?
We have never done a Stone beer. Not that there aren't Stone beers that I think would fit in that category. They definitely would. It's a mixture usually of beers that I personally pick out, that maybe Joel or Ralph have mentioned before, and suggestions we get. And we haven't ever got a suggestion from Stone, and I just haven't gotten around to any of them. But I don't know if we'll be doing anyone in the near future. Not that I'm so butthurt about the sale, but it's always a little weird when these brands get bought out and how people kind of feel about them.
Yeah, so segue into the topic of a few days ago when this happened, as of the recording of this, Stone Brewing agreed to membership interest purchase agreement with Sapporo USA to take over the entirety of the brewing side of their business. The sale is valued at $165 million with an additional $3 million in advisory fees, with an equity transfer scheduled for August. Stone's founders Greg Cook and Steve Wagner will step away from the brewing side of the business, but will retain all of their ownership of Stone Distributing, which is a distributor that they own in California, distribute their own beers and many other craft breweries. I think that this one comes as a surprise to a lot of people, not so much that they sold, because a lot of breweries, especially in the age range of Stone, have sold, merged, been invested in by other companies. It's the fact that one Greg Cook has been so adamant about selling out and calling people out for it for so long. He dubbed himself Beer Jesus at one point. This is surprising to some, not surprising to others, especially coming off of the big lawsuit with Molson Coors or Miller, or whatever, for the whole Keystone thing, which they actually won, but I'm sure they owed a lot in legal fees on. Kevin, what were your thoughts on Stone selling at all, let alone to Sapporo?
I feel like at this point we can just play whatever segment that we ran last about the last brewery sale, and just you Mike, you can do my voice or Joel's voice and just dub in the new breweries' names, and we can just go from there. Because unfortunately, I do feel like a broken record very often in these situations, in that I'm not surprised in any way, shape, or form that this is happening. Whether or not a brewery has stated unequivocally that they are not going to be for sale and they're going to stay independent or what have you, that's just not the reality of the industry and where it's going. It's not surprising for anyone. There is no brewery in this world that I would be surprised on if they sold tomorrow. None. I think that you've got an industry that is absolutely consolidating, that is having more and more, being squeezed more and more by the needs of a brewery and production and the shipping industry, and everything's more expensive and more competition. And people are saying, okay, it's time. I've built this house and I have value in it, and I can ride off into the sunset to a certain degree. So all the comments made before, that's just, I'm not saying that he didn't feel that way at the time. I'm sure when Greg Cook is sitting there saying, I will never sell out, or I'm Beer Jesus, or whatever, that's ridiculous. But saying that kind of thing, I'm sure they meant it, right? But we all know that for the right amount of money, you back a dump truck of money up to the shipping dock of your brewery, there's very few people that aren't going to say yes.
I agree with that. And I think that these sales are less surprising to me from a business standpoint than like each time that they happen, because the longer I'm in this industry, the more it makes sense to me, because this is a very tiring industry at points. You put a lot of work into something, especially something that you're so passionate about and you love so much, for not a whole lot of return on it. You you sacrifice time and energy from your family, your life outside of your work, and to have someone come along and be like, I will give you many, many numbers to take your company. And you're like, sweet. And I can probably take at least a few weeks off now and not have to worry about anything. I, a long time ago, would have thought very negatively of something like this because of this whole punk rock mentality inside of my brain. And, people change and your mindsets change. Where you look changes. And I think that that's a thing that is sometimes frowned upon in our world, is changing your mind. And I think that that's a sad thing. That people are like, why aren't you're sticking to your guns on something? Oh, I have evidence of sometimes firsthand that that's not how things really go anymore. So my stance has changed, and people think that you're terrible for changing your opinion on something. But I just do, I do like to rub the nose into the shit of people who are so outlandish about stuff like this, like Greg, like Tony McGee, formerly of Lagunitas, like, who were probably two of the most staunch, like, we're not doing this shit, and here they are, they did that shit. If they would have, through some of these times, been like, this is a little bit different, this is that, this, like, and budged a little bit, but they never really did. They just stood their ground on things, and then ultimately when they gave in to something, it made like, look at you fucking asshole. I wish people weren't so afraid of changing their minds and changing their opinions, because I think that that's an okay thing to do, and no one should look poorly on you for receiving new information and forming a new opinion. But
well, that's something that I want to credit this to Christopher Hitchens, but it could be entered my brain through some other means. But something to the fact of being in an argument, probably with someone on the religious side of things, and saying, yes, when I get new information, I take it in and use it to change my opinion. What do you do, sir? Right? With new information, how do you not change your opinion? This is not dogma. We're on the outside of the industry. Now you're on the inside of the industry. Of course. And even somebody who is outlandish and says, we will not do this, they're allowed to change their minds. They're allowed to move on from that position, get older. Because if you made that statement when you're 30 and now you're 45, I hope you're a different person. I'll turn 41 years old this year, and if I knew myself at 35 and could meet in a bar somewhere, we'd be very different people, and I'm proud of that. And I hope I'll say the same thing when I'm 50 and 55 and 60. So, yes, I'm wholeheartedly with you with people being allowed to change their minds, and I also love that your last call from last week was about people who want to be the voice of the industry. And it very much ties into making some of these grandiose statements and putting their foot down and saying, well, we are the people that aren't going to sell out. We're going to be the guiding light that this industry can get behind. And yeah, you take a little bit of pleasure in seeing somebody get knocked off that horse. Yeah. But at the same time, we don't know the situations. I've said it over and over again. I cannot ever see barrel monks at our size being bought for millions and millions of dollars. I mean, it would be 10, 20 years down the road and a lot of expansion and a lot of growth to even get us in the ballpark to be looked at there. But I'd be open. But right now I'm open to it because this is the realities of the business and realities of being able to support your family and live comfortably and see something that you love grow and prosper and succeed.
Yeah. I mean, let's kind of look at it this way. 10 years ago, I came into this industry officially 10 years ago, and you and I, we knew each other. We probably weren't as close as we are now, but you and I were not with the people who we are now married to and have children with. Our lives are very different from 10 years ago. And like, I think that I am a much better person than I was back then, 10 years ago, 29 at that time. And it's, I'm happy to say that my opinions have changed. My ideas on life have changed. I used to think that like eating whatever was important because fuck it, we only have one life. Might as well eat what. Well, you know what? If I do that, yeah, sure, I might be happy, but I might die 15 years earlier than I could if I took better care of myself. So I have made that a point of my life, is taking care of myself, because, and especially now that I have a wife and I have 2 small children who I want to see grow up and see what they become. So the changing of opinions is something I welcome, and I look forward to people. I'll dunk on some here and there. Like I said, like Greg, he kind of deserves it. But changing your opinion on something like that and being open about it, I think that's the most important thing. Being open about changing your opinion on something, I think, goes a long way. I think if Greg would have, I don't know, like, I haven't even seen if Greg has put out a statement, and probably by the time this comes out, he will have, and then we'll be outdated with this episode because that's how this fucking podcast rolls. It's going to be interesting. Like, they actually put out that they plan on the business being profitable for 2023 and aim for making 860,000 barrels in the U.S. by 2024 through this change. So those are lofty goals.
I would love to know where the success of so many of these sales from the past and how they have turned out, because from the outside looking in, a lot of them look like they have not been good deals for the company that have bought them. That's just something that it seems like to me. Maybe I'm just biased from the whole Ballast Point deal from back in the day, but
infamously bad.
Right. So I could be completely off base on that, but I look at my own market that we work in, and Stone has become an afterthought. They are not a market leader in any way, shape, or form. You'd be hard pressed to find a tap handle anywhere. Yes, they do have some grocery package out there, but it's not super strong from what I understand. So I wonder how they plan to get more market penetration in different markets outside of California and where they're already strong, just because they've got better distribution networks. I don't necessarily know they're going to get better pull through on the shelves, and that's really what it ends up with. You could have the best distributor in the world, you can get primo placement, but if you don't get pull through, you don't get pull through, and you get dropped from those sets. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works out. And maybe this is like a broken record, but I'll say it again anyway. If you are a fan of this brewery and have been for years and have supported them in the past, continue to do so. If you love the beer, drink the beer, be proud that you still love the beer and that they were successful enough to grow this brand to what it was. If you're the kind of person who is more punk rock and will not support a brewery like this now, great. Next man up, right? If you're a bar and you don't want to carry Stone anymore, there's another local brand that would be happy to take that tap handle. And somebody else will come in and fill those shoes, and it's better for all of us little guys that these guys end up kind of working itself out up there at the top of the tree of craft brewery, up in the higher branches, that we can kind of monopolize some of those smaller areas and fill those, and that kind of volume is huge for us. Huge.
Yeah. Changing course very slightly, because I feel like this is something that we bring up with every episode because the story continues to develop and unfold. Last episode, we kind of briefly talked about the auction of Modern Times and how the opening bid that was like kind of the bid to beat came from Maui Brewing for, I think it was only like $7.5 million. And I love how I say only as a person who has no millions of dollars. But so this auction closed out, and there is actually a winner, if you will, a company that is backed by a brewery called Brewery X out of Anaheim, California, are the winners and of the approved sale of Modern Times for $20 million. Still, I feel like despite that, that's still a good deal more than 7.5. $20 million for a top 50 craft brewery, like production craft brewery in the U.S. is a very small amount of money, really. Like, we're talking about Stone, who is, I think, in the top 10, sold for 160 something just a bit ago. And we have Modern Times going for 20 to another company.
We've kind of talked the Modern Times thing backwards, forwards, ups and down. So not a lot to add to that, but it's another thing. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that it seems a little undervalued, because I'm not sure what value these brands are really bringing to these new portfolios. Unless you feel like you can grow significantly. Because that's what it all comes down to. We're talking about these brands need significant growth. They may be in the top 50 or the top 10, but Sapporo buying Stone, if they're the number 10 brewer, they're not going, oh man, we bought the number 10 craft brand. They're buying that going, we better be in the top 5 at some point. That's what a business that is looking out for their business and trying to grow is trying to accomplish. So I just wonder, with the shelf space as it is, with the landscape being so compartmentalized and people, the real heavy users of craft beer clinging to the smallest, most boutique brands that are serving them on a silver platter, and the kind of nebulous new consumers finding their beer and sticking to it, how those brands are going to grow and how they're going to pay off these big investments that people are making. So someone being a little undervalued, not surprised.
Yeah. Well, there's been some other stuff going on with this whole thing. Like there was apparently a company that bid higher but had a larger closing window period, and there's a whole lot still to unfold from this. Modern Times just said the other day that they need another $400,000 to fund operations through the close of this sale. This probably won't be the last time that we mention Modern Times on this podcast, but I find this still an intriguing story because of how seemingly powerful this brand was, but really wasn't when you got to the core of it. And I think that there's a lot of people who tried to form their business models on Modern Times and might be like, fuck, we're screwed if this is the way that they were doing things. And yeah, so we'll see what else comes of this. But let's go into what we really wanted to talk about today, our main story, our main topic. Kevin, you were supposed to be a couple weekends ago in Kansas City, Missouri for Boulevardia, pouring Barrel of Monk's beers, meeting the people, being a man of the people.
which is what I am.
That it is. That is why they call you Kevin Man of the People Abbott.
They do.
I've heard tens of people call you that.
At least 3.
At least 3.
Yeah.
Possibly 4. And you fell victim to what it seems like a lot of people are falling victim to. Your flight was canceled.
Well, I think our listeners would like nothing more than for me to explain my harrowing flight experience. So I'm going to just jump right into that, because this is what you call, this is high test stuff. This is the kind of stuff that really brings in the downloads. I was supposed to go in. Joel was at one point supposed to join me on this trip. He's actually one of the reasons. He is the reason why we were invited to Boulevardia, because of a connection that he had made, and they invited us on the strength of having our wizard and loving it and saying, "Hey, you should come on out." And Joel had been out there before. Joel then was not able to come with me, so I was going to have to go out by myself. Which, listen, I travel by myself. I've had to do stuff like this before, so I was fine with that. I headed out on my Uber at about 5 o'clock in the morning, getting a very early flight that I had to connect from Florida through South Carolina, North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, and then I was going to go over to Boulevardia in Kansas City. And because I was going through American Airlines, the flight was canceled. And in the middle of my Uber ride, I found that out by checking my ticket. And this was part of this huge slew of flight cancellations stemming from the weekend before, and it's happened each weekend since then. It's really a mess. And the best part about it was I still wanted to get out. I was flying out on a Friday to get in on a Friday afternoon and then serve beer on Saturday. So I thought, hey, maybe I can still get a later flight. When I called to try to figure something out with the airline to get me out to this thing that I was booked on, I had beer out there already. I had commitments. They have a hotel for me. The recording said that your callback will be in more than 8.5 hours. So that's a sign that you are not going to get out on a flight today, right? So after going through a lot of automated stuff, I finally got a automated service that said that we have rebooked you on a flight for tomorrow, and you will get into Kansas City by about 1 p.m., which is an hour into when I should be working. So obviously that wasn't going to work for me, and the whole trip got blown up. Thankfully, the folks at Boulevard were very understanding. They had our booth there. They had a volunteer pouring our beer the entire time. I'm sure I'm guessing I might have not been the only person that was not able to be there because of all this nonsense and rigmarole. But it was a shame. I was really looking forward to it. And it's one of the, I don't get the chance to do a lot of events these days. And while they're not my favorite thing to do, because they are a lot of work, there's still a little bit of joy involved in going out, especially to a new event and a big event like that. And it's kind of sucked to not be able to do it. So I hope that maybe we get a chance to do it again next year.
Yeah. When I heard about that, I was super bummed for you. I know that this is happening to a lot of people. I did see also on Twitter that a friend of the show, Sam Tierney, who is a brewer for Firestone Walker's propagator, was bummed to not get to meet you because he follows and talks with Joel and I a good bit on Twitter, and so he's familiar with Barrel of Monks, and he really wanted to meet you. But maybe there will be a future year at Boulevardia for you guys.
We hope so. And those are the kind of events, the specialty events, especially with such a great brewery like Boulevard and such an interesting concept, a music festival kind of atmosphere that is not just your everyday beer fest and your everyday beer event, which honestly, I think we've talked about this kind of on the periphery since I've been on the show. We're all kind of burnt out on those. The normal in town, hey, we're having a beer fest and we want 2 half barrels of free beer and we're going to make $60,000 off this event and you're going to get promotion. You're going to get exposure. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, we'll be there because we kind of have to because everybody else is going to be there, but there's no joy in that. This is a different kind of atmosphere that I was hoping for, and it makes me pine for the days when that was all still so exciting for me, and every beer fest was fun, and everything was new, and I was looking at the beer scene with fresh eyes.
Yeah, and that I think is a thing that we wanted to talk about on this as positive stories on Beer Fest, positives takes on Beer Fest, because yeah, like you said, even before the pandemic happened, we had all too many people just being like, I'm putting on a beer fest. Do you want to donate X amount of half barrels to our thing? Like, no, we don't. But you'll get exposure. Okay. And so often I feel like I'm going to be negative for a little bit, but
Go right ahead,
I swear I'll get into positives.
It would not be United We Drink if we did not start out at least a little bit negative.
It will not be. I feel like the beer fest thing, the best thing to happen to the beer fest was the pandemic, because I didn't want to do a beer fest ever again for a period, because they were, for the most part, all the same, especially your local ones. You have a few here and there that you enjoy, like Jupiter is one here in our local area. The Jupiter Craft Brewers Festival, an annual festival here, is one that I always kind of enjoyed doing. But there's for every one of those, there's 7 ones that you don't want to take part in, because you're not, despite the amount of people that come up and you might kick your kegs, it's give me the strongest thing you got, the latest thing you got. I don't give a fuck who you are. I'm just here to get hammered because it was $45 for me to drink as much as I want, and I am going to put that to the test, and then I'm going to fall down. But places that have come up with a good concept for being specialty with their beer fests, like being lager only or wild ale only, or something like that, or combining it with a music festival, a community-oriented thing, I think have done better and have become something that at least I want to participate in, because I think that they're better, not just for our company, but I think that it's better for everyone who is being involved. Like, yeah, ultimately we should be looking at what's best for our business, but I want everyone to be able to succeed, because we can all succeed together if it's a good event. And just having something more small, niche, community focused, to me is what I look for when people are talking about beer fests. And maybe you have a different opinion on that, but I'd like to see what you see in an ideal beer fest nowadays.
Well, one of the main things, I love what you said, Mike, about the speciality of doing a beer fest. And Barrel of Monks was involved in doing a Belgian-only beer fest several years ago, which the concept was Best of the Belgians. We brought in tons of great classic Belgian beers brewed by American breweries, and it had limited success. We were partners with a couple other people, and we could have done better, but it was the first time we ever put anything like that on. And the good thing about doing a fest like that, that's sour related or Belgian related or lagers, is that you do get, I think, more of a crowd that is interested in what the people are doing, not just the fact that a beer fest is going on. And it limits some of the just trying to get hammered crowd. And I also want to throw out there is that that's the crowd that gets the most hate in a beer fest. But there is one of the main reasons why you're supposed to give free beer to these events is to get people to come into your brewery eventually, or pick your beer off the shelf, or order a draft. And yeah, the I'm going to get hammered guy, and it's always a guy, that person is not going to do that. But there's also tons of just local people that are just on the periphery, going in there, spending their $45 and wandering in and going, oh, brewery here in Boca Raton, where are you? I'm on Rogers Circle. I work on Rogers Circle. What building? The Penn, Florida building. I work in the Penn, Florida building. Oh, you know that business right next to you that's been open for 7 years? Yeah, we're in that building. Oh, I'll come by and see you sometime. Never see that person ever again. There is this contingent, this idea, even with people that have the best intentions, very rarely plays out. And I am convinced that if my breweries have done half the beer fest that we've done over the past 7 years, we'd have the same exact sales as we do right now. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's moved the needle one iota, and I don't think any new one's going to do the same thing. As far as what I look for, someone that wants to pay for beer. And and if you're going to make money off this event, right, because that's what these people are doing for. I know there's usually a charity attached, and I begrudge nobody trying to make a profit. And we have friends that put on these beer fests, and I will still donate to their beer fests because I like doing them and I believe in them, and it's not a terrible thing for them to not be paying for the beer. But we're not just doing this for marketing. We're doing this to make money off product that we want to send to you. If you want specialty beers that we can make a lot of money off of and a lot of margin in our tasting rooms, and you want us to bring those specialty beers, even a slim of that beer, and you don't want to pay anything for it, well, why would I bring that to that event? Why would I make it special for you when I could sell it and make $500, $600 off that slim? So I think paying for the beer is something that I'd like to see more and more often. And I think obviously the specialization of that, and smaller events, more intimate, more events where you can really engage with people, food-related events that people are thinking a little bit more about what they're eating and drinking. Those are the kind of things that I look for and get excited about. The other ones are the ones that they come into my inbox. I talk with my sales rep, Sean, and say, hey, do we want to do this? He goes, yeah, why not? And then we do it. But we never expect anything from it.
Yeah. I'm fairly certain since the pandemic started, I can count on one hand how many beer fests we've done. And it's mostly been events for friends. Like Fran, who puts on the Jupiter Craft Brewers Festival, is a friend of ours. We've had our beer there, but we haven't been present at the last two because honestly, it's still pandemic time and we don't have people who have been comfortable doing that at those points. And then anniversary parties for a brewery friend or something of that magnitude. Other than that, we haven't done any beer fests. And you know what? I don't think that our business has hurt us any by not doing them. But before we recorded this show, we said we were going to be positive about beer fests and talk about our positive experiences with beer fests, like the particulars of that. So I would like to talk about some beer fests from patron standpoint and supplier standpoint of places that I've had a great time with. And I will start this off by saying I have been to beer fests as a patron and as a supplier for Beer Advocate run beer fest, and they have been fucking fantastic. Extreme Beer Fest I have poured at as a supplier a few times. I've been there for one one time as a patron, and I have done their Sour Fest, their Wild Fest. I don't remember exactly what it was called when I lived in Philly. And like my wife and I flew up to Boston for the weekend and had a nice weekend in Boston, went to the beer fest. It was for Kevin, he'll remember this. It was at the Cyclonorama, the old, smaller venue for the Extreme Beer Fest, then the Seaport, where they moved it to. It was amazing. It was fun. It was small. It was intimate. It was good sour beers. And I think it's the only beer fest that since I've really worked in the industry that I have paid for to go and attend. And I'm so happy that I did, because I got to have some good beer from Russian River, from Allagash, from Lost Abbey, and and so many others. And in just this small, intimate setting, specialized. And that was a thing that I said before. I love the specialized aspect. I love the small and intimate aspect. And small and intimate can mean packed to the fucking gills if you're in a small venue. But it was just the right amount of people. Everyone could mingle. There wasn't very long lines. I thought that it was fantastic. And from a supplier side with Beer Advocate, those people always treated us fucking good. Like, had like bathrooms just for suppliers, had food and stuff. Like, I can't say nice enough things. I know that things have changed. Like, they're owned by Next Glass now, but I don't know how things go over there anymore. But fucking Todd and Jason were fucking nice to us in the times that we've worked with them. So I can't say more nice things about Beer Advocate related beer fests.
So to me, to break it down a little bit, I would look at some of those out of town beer fests like Extreme Beer Fest that I definitely want to talk about sometimes, an experience I had there. But talking specifically first about the in-town stuff in South Florida before South Florida became what it is today. And I'm talking about the times when I literally knew everybody that owned a brewery and every person that worked in the industry. And going down to the Key West Beer Fest or going up to Jupiter and just walking around and knowing all the faces and feeling it like I was part of the community and really finding a home, right? It was a passion that we all had in craft beer, and it was people that were in my local community that I knew from drinking at bars and working at local restaurants and working at the local distributor and working at local breweries. And there was something amazing about it when and listen, I know I'm pining for days when there weren't as many people working in the industry and there weren't people selling as much beer. I understand that. But personally, when I first found that niche and was able to experience it with people I really loved and respected and enjoyed their company, was amazing. And there's a couple times I would point out. One was going down to the Key West Craft Beer Fest for the first time with Barrel of Monks, and Phil Palmisano was working with us at the time. So Phil and I went down together, shared a hotel room, and I remember just walking the streets the night before the beer fest, well lit, I would have to say, and just going to Denny's. But without a huge crowd of people. We had been out drinking with a bunch of friends, a bunch of people that we knew and had known for years and years. But we were a brand new brewery. I had a friend of mine, someone who I respected so much in the industry. I was so lucky to have on the staff for that period of time. And just being happy that I was here, happy that we were growing something, happy I was with a friend and sharing that time. That's something that I'll always remember. And another time was a little bit later on when I went down to work the same beer fest in Key West, and Barrel of Monks did a beer dinner the night before. And two people, Dustin Jeffers, who was at that time with Saltwater Brewing, and Tom Barris, who I'm not sure.
Dustin now works for Next Glass.
Yes, he does. Dustin does. And Tom Barris, who at that time, I think he might have been still with Barley Mow at the time. of this year, but they both came back to the hotel room. They both came to the dinner, came back to my hotel room that night, and we just drank beer and we talked about the industry and how much we loved simplistic, great craft beer. And then we talked about anything but beer. And it was several hours of just waxing poetic and being around two great people and someone with Tom that I had known for 10 years and who I so rarely got to see and who I love with all my heart, and spending time with those guys. And it was all surrounded by a beer fest. It was all surrounded by just being in town for something like that. And I can't take those memories away, right? They mean the world to me, of being in that community. So I understand when someone's getting into this industry for the first time, or people that have not experienced this before, they're still really excited about these things. And I'm sitting there like the curmudgeonly old man going, I don't want to do that anymore. But they're experiencing those things for the first time and having those stories. And I have to remember that and just appreciate it.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned Tom Barris, and he's probably one of the best people in this industry in Florida. That
one of the best people.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah. That's true. Very true. I miss Tom a lot, and I don't get to see him. He messaged me out of the blue a few weeks ago. He was having one of our beers at a place around the corner from his house. He's like, "Hey, good placement." And I'm like, "Oh man, thanks." Saw him at former host of the show's Phil's wedding, and just loved seeing him, loved talking to him, and having some of those times. I did Key West Beer Fest with you when we were both at our former brewery. And sometimes there's just, those events that are slightly enough far away from home where you get to spend a night in a hotel or on someone's couch, like Hanapu Day weekends where we worked across numerous different breweries, but for some reason always found ourselves on Phil's parents' couches and guest rooms and air mattresses. I think those Hanapu weekends were always ones that I looked forward to, and it wasn't so much for the event. It was for Friday night going to Tampa Tap House and playing pool and shooting the shit with a bunch of fucking awesome people who I love. It was about, after the beer fest, going somewhere and just unwinding and talking about the dumb shit that happened, talking about the awesome shit that happened, and then the next morning having breakfast all together somewhere, and then heading back home in a van or a car or whatever, and just bullshitting again. It was just, those were great memories and great weekends built around a beer fest that, sometimes weren't always about the beer, and they were about the people and hanging out. And I know that sometimes we rag on the bro mentality of this industry, and I do think that does suck a lot of times, but it's not going to take away that we just had good times with some people that we've known for a long time and really enjoyed seeing, and maybe don't get to see as often as we'd like to. Did I meet other people along the way at these festivals? Yeah, but you know what? They had their own cliques. They didn't want to hang out with us, and whatever.
Well, there was a time when so many of us could just get together and say, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" "Oh, we'll all go to the same place."
Yeah.
Because there was only so many of us. And then when it got to a point where there was so many more, you couldn't do that. You had to kind of divide into different segments and different people, and that has its place too. I'm not trying to say that just because the industry got bigger, it got worse. It's not true at all. But those times of our lives when we were more unencumbered, we didn't have kids, we could kind of do what we wanted. I mean, all these things lent to that time and place in our lives that we enjoyed, and we have to remember that is what other people are going through now. And we may have been the exact people standing behind each other's tents and other people thinking that we were the douchebag bros of the beer industry, that some of us may, throw that onto somebody else at this point. I did want to mention, because you did talk about Boston and it's the Cyclorama. I had the joy to go to Extreme Beer Fest as multiple times, and talk about your kind of coming out party and the first time you saw your beer enjoyed on a national level for the first time. And I got to experience that as the head brewer of Funky Buddha Brewing when we were nothing, when we were a 1-barrel brew house, and having Sam Calgione drinking our bourbon barrel aged maple bacon coffee porter, and talking about, oh, I love this beer. It's from something called the Lucky Buddha or something over there, and pointing over for the Night of the Barrels, and being able to have the guys from Shorts come over with their peanut butter and jelly beer. We had our peanut butter and jelly beer, and them going, man, this is so good. We should do something together. And we were just some schmucks on a 1-barrel homebrew setup, bottling beers with a beer gun in a sink, and seeing people just their eyes widen when they tried the beer. I can never take that away. That is one of the most important memories of my beer career, and something I enjoyed so much when it was new, and I was really engaging with a crowd that loved what we were doing and what everyone was doing in there. There was a specialty crowd that understood these beers, that were looking for something in particular, and this show has been very unkind to pastry stouts and smoothie sours and the pure adjunct beers, because we've kind of moved away from that as far as our preferences. But as we've always said, there's a time and place for those. And at that time and place, I appreciated that, enjoyed that, was trying to go for that, and was proud of what we were putting out next to people who had been doing it so much longer and with so much more renowned. And we were just these little guys going, I can't believe we're freaking here.
Let me ask you this. Is there a beer festival out there that you would love to attend that you've never attended before as a patron?
Not that I know of. There is no beer event that I've ever heard of that I'm like, I really want to be a part of that at some point in the near future. I've been to Great American Beer Fest. I've been to Extreme Beer Fest. And also, I'll be honest, I don't know what's going on out there. I'm not plugged into that culture well at all. The big beers and barley wine out in Colorado that we've attended on multiple occasions, my partner Matt Sadie loves, says it's amazing. I am interested. I'd be very interested to talk to anybody that's putting on a boutique, small event that has a curated list of stuff that they really love, that they believe is going to be incredible, to be selected for that and have the people there confident that that person that put that on is going to bring the goods. I don't know who in this industry has that kind of cred, but that kind of idea is the thing that I would look most forward to. And at this point, the thing I look more forward to of what is actually out there is being able to go out possibly to Boulevardia with Joel and spend that time that we just don't get to have when we have kids and we're 40 years old, or go out and do something with Sean, who is our, director of sales, or maybe bring Ralph along, who's the assistant brewer, and be able to spend a little bit of time and get them to know them a little bit better. I look forward to that stuff at this point, but the actual events themselves, it's a lot of repetition and feels very, very similar to me.
I threw you a softball there, and you whiffed. No, I'm just kidding. I gave you an opportunity to say something. I don't know. If I didn't know if there was a particular one that you really wanted to like. There's.
Did you have something in mind?
No, I just thought that maybe you would name drop where you had an opportunity to, and like be like, hey, so and so.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So first of all, I don't know what's happening outside of my own little bubble.
Come
Let's be
on.
very, very, very honest about that. So if you had any kind of idea of some beer fest you wanted to get us into, you could have like held it up to the screen and I would have, riffed on that for a short period of time. But yeah, there's a lot going on in the craft beer industry, especially in this vein, that I'm just not that privy to. It's not on my radar. If we have not been contacted for it, I'm not going and seeking it out. That's just not what is important. We are talking very much about how the ROI on the time spent on a beer fest is so minimal.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not looking going, man, what beer events happening in Portland that we could go to?
Well,
just not
I also preface this by saying as a patron.
as a patron. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there is something out there that works for you guys as a business, but like, is like I mentioned before, my wife and I going to one of the beer advocate sour festivals in Boston, and just thought that would be a fun time for a little weekend getaway for us. And I'll jump in here too and be like, there's a couple of festivals that I would love to attend as a patron. One being Firestone Walker Invitational,
Okay.
because one, Firestone Walker just in general is like, yeah, you're the cream of the crop, and
They're very good.
I expect them to pull in people who are as well, and just put on a good. I've always heard great things about their festival, and I just think that it would be a great time out in Central California. Also, just because I'm a sucker for my hometown area, Human Robot in Philly puts on a lager festival called Log Jamming that is all lagers. Like, they invite breweries from all over the country that bring your lagers, and I think that something like that is fucking amazing, and I want to go to a festival like that myself.
Well, I love that you first of all know about these events and have a passion to go attend them. I have my dreams surrounding the craft beer industry as a patron these days really revolve around going to specific breweries and hoping to spend time or meet somebody I can really learn from them, taste through their portfolio, learn more about what they do and how they do it. And this isn't just a business thing, right? This is like, I am interested in the process and what their beers taste like and things of that nature. I would love the opportunity to meet, when I do get the opportunity to meet brewers in different areas, if I'm visiting Chicago or if I would have visited Missouri. That's what I really want to do. I want those personal experiences with one brewery, get to know their portfolio intimately, taste everything they make. I like that more than tasting 50 beers from 50 other breweries. That's personally where I want to spend my time.
Okay.
On breweries that I love, or breweries that
Yeah.
I know are going to be good.
I think the same way too. And, I think that some of this goes back a little bit to the burnout episode that we talked about, and how I feel like I sometimes have this undying passion for this industry that is just like, I still want to be slightly on the consumer side as well as on the supplier side of things. Like, I still get really excited about going to a brewery that I really am like have wanted to, or that I've heard good things about. Like, a lot of my trips were, even still in the industry, were based around beer, and like, okay, what brewery can I go see in this area that I've heard about, or that is under the radar, or just what is a brewery in this area? those things just have always stuck with me. And the fact that like I still follow my old city, what's going on in Philly, and seeing that 3 older breweries have closed within the last 6 months in Philly, and this brewery is opening in that old location of that brewery, and this is going on there. Like, it excites me, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm not there." I mentioned Human Robot and their log jamming festival, and I've never had a beer from Human Robot because they didn't exist when I was still living there. Like, they came into the old St. Benjamin brewery who closed down, and went in and started making lagers that people fucking adore. And there's still this weird passion in me that wants to like know what's going on and visit the best and learn from the best and see what they're doing and just be excited about people who do things in a different way than maybe the norm.
I think that's great, Mike. And I think that we joked a little bit before the show that we are going to talk positively. And the reason we can is because Joel's not here. But we know that we all can get a little bit downtrodden on our own industry and be a little bit negative. And I love your passion. I love that you're really interested in this. I think maybe when we were talking about the difference between going out and trying a bunch of new beers, I think your explanation lines up exactly with how I feel.
Yeah.
I want to go to a brewery that I have never been before, try their Pilsner, and talk to the brewer or the owner about it for an hour. I'm that's the kind of person I am. Bruce Springsteen is one of my favorite artists of all time. I don't want to get together with Bruce and talk about Born in the USA. I want to talk about one track off the Pete Seeger sessions and one of the outtakes that I heard on a YouTube video once and how that came about. That's the kind of esoteric weirdo that I am. That's what I'm interested in. So I want to talk forever about something very small and learn all I can about it because that's where my interests lie. When I get into big areas and big events and things of that nature, it's too much for me to concentrate on. I don't even know if I'm going to remember any of the beers that I loved. And I certainly don't have the time to talk to anybody about it. So there's value in that as a consumer. There's value in that as someone participating in it. No doubt. But me personally, I want that intimate experience. And that's what I'm going to seek out for hopefully the next 30 or so years that I'm alive.
Hopefully very quick story. You mentioning esoteric, I'm so sad that Joel's not on here because anytime Joel hears that word esoteric, it takes him to, at least from my recollection, takes him to the original run of this show. We interviewed Wayne from Cigar City, Wayne Wambles, the head brewer, and before we recorded, he goes, "We're not going to have any weird esoteric questions." And Joel was just kind of like, the fuck is he talking about? Anytime someone says esoteric around Joel, it just always brought up memories of talking with Wayne and him being like, "We're not going to get really esoteric about things, are we?" And like, no, we're gonna talk about beer and brewing. But Wayne is someone who you can get very esoteric with, and he's a fun fucking conversation to have.
And I've spent a good amount of time with Wayne, especially years and years ago at some beer fest, and had the joy to talk beer with him before. And he's the kind of cat that, at least in the past, is exactly at my speed of can talk about a very specific thing to a depth that was way over my head. But I still love it because someone who could be that passionate about something so minute and so simple, that's all I want in the world. That's where the beauty lies for me, as in people that want to get very in-depth about very, very simple things, because people that are in that wavelength make great art. They make great beer. That's where the magic happens, man.
Yeah. Wonder how many times Joel has yelled at his device of choice that he's listening to this on. All right. I think that this kind of was a good positive conversation.
We made several references to people in the industry that we love. We haven't seen in a while. I think that's a good thing. I don't know how many people listening know any of those people, or they're going to go, we don't care about these people because we've never heard of them before. But it does show that we love this industry. It's weaned us. It's given us our livelihoods, and there's some really, really great things about it, and great things going forward still.
Yeah. All right. Want to head into last calls?
Let's do it.
All right. Time for the part of the episode we call last calls. This is where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want to, unobjected, uninterrupted, unopposed. And I'll start things off here. And I just want to give a quick recommendation. And you know what? I feel like a lot of people already know this one by the time that I'm putting this out there. The Bear on FX, on Hulu FX, cross-promotional thing. I've only watched 2 episodes so far, and I fucking love it. It portrays the restaurant industry to a fucking T so far. The chaotic nature of working in a restaurant and just people talking over one another, the down talking, the up talking, the order of how things run in a small, large restaurant. I'd heard so many people talk about how much they loved this show, and I'm like, all right, it's on my list. I'm finishing up a couple things, trying to catch up on things, but I'm gonna watch it. So right before we came on to this air, we watched a couple episodes, and within it wasn't the first scene, but the very second scene of the first episode, they kicked into the refused new noise. And I'm like, all right, I was already hyped up about this show, but now you fucking play one of the best punk rock songs of all time. I'm going to fucking love this show. I can't wait to see what else is in store with. I've heard tons of people just say great things, and please go watch The Bear. As if FX, Hulu need more money and more views, but you know what? It seems fucking fantastic to me.
So I know this is a little bit unconventional, but I'm an unconventional person. Mike, should I do something like upbeat and positive, or something like serious?
You've done a lot of serious stuff recently, so why change that?
Okay, I thought you were going to go in a different direction, but here we go. So a lot of people in my circle have been devastated about the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade that came down as of this podcast, days ago. But obviously later on down the line, and when you're listening to this, my brother-in-law even said I had to stop working that day because it destroyed me. I have been on the train of the Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Nature bandwagon of the society is getting better. It's getting more free. It's getting less religious. It's getting better for us, for all people, on a gradual scale over a period of time. And the events that have happened over the last 4 to 6 years have really put a damper on that, and really had me questioning my positive nature about reality and where we're going, especially with a 4-year-old child in my house. And I'm finding it harder and harder to know how to talk to him about this. And as the religious right is taking over our government and taking over laws and limiting freedoms for our citizens. If you're in that bubble, if you're not in that bubble, if you are one of the people who have been deeply affected by this, I am sorry. I hope that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I hope that there is a rubber band effect of bouncing back from these setbacks, these huge chasmous setbacks. But hopefully they're just setbacks. And 20, 30 years down the line, we will look at this period of time as a blip on the radar. I know it does not downplay what is the physical ramifications that are happening, that are going to happen immediately to people right now. But I hope that it will be a blip on the radar, a downswing in the liberties that we have in this country on an eventual upswing. I'm trying to be positive. I really want to be. I want to feel like even with what's happening now, we can move forward. I'm so encouraged by the younger generation and what I think they're going to bring to politics and what I think they're going to bring to humanity and decency as they get older and become of voting age and can get into power and to become politicians themselves. And that's all I'm talking to Jad about, my son, is, you're going to have a choice and have a voice in this someday in the future. And if you don't like it, and if you feel that it's unreasonable and you want to take a stand, you're going to have a voice. And that is, unfortunately, the best place to hang my hat at this time. So if you're like me, if you're feeling this in your bones and you don't want to talk about it, or it's too much, find some place to put your positivity and your hope for the future, and hope that this is going to be a black mark that we'll look back on as a species, 20, 30 years down the road.
Very well said, my friend. Anything you want to plug, Kev?
After that?
I'm sorry.
No. It's just, I was just, feeling it a little bit there. And now I'm going to say positive things and ask you to go buy my beer, which seems wholly inappropriate, but I'll do it anyway. We are going to have a really cool event on July 16th, which is my birthday, actually. But we're going to have a release of our Quandrum, which is a quad aged in a rum barrel that we do every single year in small quantities. We're doing that on July 16th. But the cool aspect about that is not just that beer, but we're going to be partnering with the Palm Beach Draftsmen for a homebrew event on the same day. And it's going to revolve around several homebrewers making clone recipes of our Wizard White Ale, our most popular beer. And they are going to be judged on who clones that beer the best. They've been given aspects of the recipe and a lot of information, a lot of tips to try to make this beer to spec. And we, as people from Barrel of Monks, are going to pick a winner. But people who buy a ticket for this event will also be able to vote for who wins that clone competition. There'll also be a best in show competition for whatever beer that those brewers decide to bring in addition to this. You're also going to have an opportunity to drink 6 different Barrel of Monks beers, including Quandrum, including the Wizard White Ale, unlimited samples of that, all as well as having this Quandrum release. I love working with with home brewers. I started as a home brewer. This is the fun aspect of beer, and it's trying to do something very specific and trying to do it really, really well. I'm excited about this, and if you're interested in this, go to barrelofmonks.com, and you'll be able to buy a ticket and join us for this really, really cool event.
Awesome. You can follow me at Mike Loves Beer on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow the show at United We Drink on Twitter, at United We Drink Pod on Instagram. And you can subscribe to the show on any of the major podcast apps. We should be there. If we're not, let us know. We'll get on it. Other than that, we will be back in a couple weeks with Joel, probably back in tow. Who knows? Maybe he'll come back from Sedona, or maybe he'll be all about crystals or some other weird hippie thing after his time out there. We shall see. In the meantime, go check out a lot of the brands that we love and cherish so dear. I know that we have mentioned Made In a bunch of times on this podcast, but we've just added 3 new pieces to our home. Got a nonstick pan. We got a pizza stone, or a pizza steel rather, and a new chef's knife from Made In. Fucking beautiful stuff.
Do you have any space left in your kitchen?
I've thrown stuff out.
It's just Made In products stacked upon Made In products.
I get rid of the non-Made In stuff and just replace them. It's fucking good quality shit there. I can't, like, I'm not kidding. We were a Made In house before we started kind of harping Made In on this show. I've believed in them from the first piece of equipment that I've had, and we have close to 20 pieces from them in our house now. Like, I really do believe in Made In.
When you mention equipment, I just think of like industrial drilling equipment.
You know,
do you have an auger?
We do. We have one of those. We have a centrifuge. I still have beer glasses for Joel and you that I like. You were at my brewery like a month ago, and I completely forgot to bring those glasses to give to you and be like, here's one for you. Here's one for Joel. They are from Made In. They gave them to us. So if that should be any cue that we should hang out soon, I don't know what is. But yeah, go check out Made In, unitedwedrink.com/Made In. I fucking love their stuff. If you want to take your cooking seriously in your house and get good cookware, fucking go there. Other than that, we'll be back here in a couple weeks, probably talking about something alcohol related. Probably. Some Batman will probably be thrown in there because Joel will be back. And yeah, you know, that's how we roll. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Miss you, Joel.
I don't.